It seems Nigeria's government is yet to reconcile its accounts with oil marketers despite having pledged to actually cover arrears last week. Now, the end result is a nasty one. Snaking queues at petrol stations, very frustrated motorists and billions of dollars of losses in productivity. The question we'll be asking from London and Lagos tonight is, what happens now? Can Nigeria ever really fix its domestic fuel retail system? Welcome to Global Business Africa. I'm Ramanyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Here's what else we have in the pipeline. Egypt will be rolling out a smart card system to better manage its expenditure on fuel subsidies. And we'll be talking to an entrepreneur in Zimbabwe who says the sun is a way to go if you want to get people on the grid. Right then, let's start in Nigeria. The Security and Civil Defense Corps says it has now started to arrest illegal oil marketers in the wake of the lingering fuel scarcity in the country. The latest shortage has seen petrol prices on the black market soar, even though the country's finance ministry says importers were paid over $700 million to cover outstanding subsidies. Now, the lack of fuel supplies still persists. Our starting point is Africa's biggest economy, where Voldy Karel's report of growing rage among commuters.
The strike by oil importers is now entering its second month. Despite government assurances that marketers have been paid for outstanding subsidies, motorists in the country's major cities are still struggling to fill their tanks. Samuel Onyuho has taken matters into his own hands.
Since over a month, we are finding it difficult to get fuel into our vehicle. That is the reason why I'm using this opportunity to have my small generator as a standby in my car, to get fuel from the station and get into my car.
Feel sad, demoralized that the system is not really working. You understand? Because I can imagine somebody leaving his house as early as 6:37 and getting to a filling station, and you spend 7-8 hours in the queue to get fuel.
The fuel crisis began in early March when slumping oil prices sent the local currency to record lows, hitting importers who struggled to open letters of credit with banks. Truckers, unable to discharge tankers, also went on strike over the cash crunch. The finance ministry issued sovereign debt notes to fuel marketers last month, but banks remained reluctant to issue letters of credit until they matured. Marketers say they're still owed money from subsidies. Gasoline in the country is heavily subsidized by the government. The slow repayment of subsidies has been a problem for years. Analysts say politics is largely to blame for the continuing crisis.
They have discrepancies. Number one, you notice that Moman is saying that's the major marketers association of Nigeria is saying that government is still owing them about 200 billion, where the government said plus or minus is about 131 billion from the 98 billion. But I think one is getting a bit worried that some level of politics actually had come into it. I think it's becoming very funny.
But motorists and commuters are unable to find any humor in this situation that's threatening their very livelihoods. Voldy Karel's, CCTV.
Gulf oil exporters must slash spending and diversify their economies in order to cope with lower oil revenues. Granted, if you're watching this, it's probably not a new argument for you. It's still a valid one, though, and its latest advocate is IMF's Middle East chief, Masood Ahmed. He told AFP that wealthy monarchies in the Gulf should not have a knee-jerk reaction to lower oil prices. Instead, he's advising that they should gradually adjust, using reserves accumulating during years of triple-digit oil prices. Both WTI and Brent crude fell by over 50% since June 2014. They are expected to be much lower than the break-even price needed for some Gulf countries' budgets, at least for the next 3 to 4 years. Now then, let's expand this conversation and focus on the question here of what happens with regards to Nigeria and, of course, the global trend with oil prices across the board. Deji Badmus is live in Lagos. Kelly Lemon, or rather, apologies for that. Kelly Lemon is live in London. Let's start with you, Kelly. Brent crude futures rallying to 2015 high in trading on Monday and again setting another high in trading today. Is there fundamental support for this rally to continue, or is it just vulnerable to sudden change in sentiment?
Well, certainly demand has surprised on the upside, and traders say the reason we're seeing such a bounce in oil prices is because the futures market oversold in the first part of the year. Now, we're seeing two viewpoints among traders. Part of the market is warning that low oil prices over the past 6 months have really damaged the US oil production market, and as a result, they're expecting prices to continue their recovery. Now, the contrasting viewpoint is US oil production industry has become relatively flexible to market changes and can cope, which means we'll see a bear market again. So analysts are quite split over this topic.
Indeed, but to what extent does this recovery, for example, boost the fiscal stability of Nigeria and Ghana in 2015, respectively? What are the areas of concern for both countries?
Well, in terms of Nigeria and many oil-producing countries in the region, analysts say the recent fluctuations in oil prices aren't necessarily enough to balance the books. Now, let's not forget that oil accounts for about 85 to 90% of Nigeria's revenues, worth more than 89 million US dollars. Now, those countries extremely reliant on oil production for GDP growth still have a big deficits to fill, and the increase in the cost of crude, at this stage at least, isn't really enough to fill that gap.
Finally, Kelly, isn't in some respects this current rally essentially one big bet? The Chinese authorities will take steps to revive factory output. I mean, after all, what are the odds that the Chinese authorities might not necessarily do what the market is expecting them to?
Well, analysts say poor data from China keeps spooking the market when it's released. However, the analysts that we're talking to don't expect Chinese growth to fall below 5 or 6%, and they are betting that China will continue to be the engine of growth in terms of oil prices. Now, the bigger question that analysts are asking at the moment is the impact the US oil shale industry will have on production levels. Analysts say the demand expectations will continue to grow and are relatively easy to forecast given a growing population, more cars on the road and those sorts of things. The bigger question analysts are asking is what will happen to supply levels in the short and long term.
Indeed, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. That's Kelly Lemon live in London. Worth keeping in mind, of course, the IA did forecast that at some point in April, that would be when US oil would peak. And after that, we'd see a decline roughly in the order of about 200 or so thousand barrels of crude a day. Now, we're still very much on fuel matters. Starting on the 15th of June, Egypt's government will be rolling out a smart card system to manage its public expenditure on fuel subsidies. This plan, of course, has been in the works for a while. It's been postponed several times since 2013. And it is part of a plan to cut subsidy spending, which has sucked up 13% of government expenditure in the 2014-2015 budget. Planning Minister Ashraf El-Arabi says the cards will monitor consumption patterns to determine future rationing as well. The system also aims at curbing corruption and smuggling and building a strong database on accurate, reliable information on fuel use. Last year, the government raised some fuel prices by up to 78% in an effort to cut its budget deficit to around 10% of GDP. For more data on this, Yasser Kim is live in Cairo right now. Fresh, of course, off his victory in racing across the Nile with Adel Makhrouki. Let's focus on this new oil system, though. It starts on the 15th of June. Walk us through exactly how it works. What happens once it's introduced?
Well, first of all, it will be introduced in Cairo, Giza, and Qalyubia, three of the largest governorates in Egypt, Cairo being obviously the capital. What will happen is that all smart cards will be distributed to car owners, and all the list of owners will be brought from the government and from the Ministry of Interior. It can be also delivered to their homes. This will be the first phase, just to monitor the consumption of these areas. It will then be extended to other governorates and cities afterwards. So it will not be used to ration first. It will just be used to monitor how much consumption is being done. And also there will be smart cards distributed to the petrol and fuel companies as well, to ensure the amount of oil or fuel that has been given or supplied to the stations. So to balance the supply and demand together. And also this way it will avoid smuggling.
Indeed. Authorities, of course, also aimed to cut spending, at least based on the data that they shared with the IMF, by around half, from 6.3% of GDP in the 2013-2014 fiscal year to about 3.1% in the current fiscal year. Are they on track to hit that goal?
Yes, the government says it's still on track. Actually, it might even exceed that goal because the price of oil around the world has gone down. The international prices have gone down, which means less expenditure on subsidies, less expenses on fuel and oil as subsidies. So actually, they are optimistic. They're telling us they're optimistic they can even exceed this target.
Indeed. Finally, as plans to introduce value-added taxes have been in the pipeline for quite a while in Egypt, will that affect fuel prices or gasoline, diesel and kerosene all VAT exempt?
It's been exempted, yes. Oil, gas and kerosene are exempted from VAT, but the prices will increase. We are talking about a gradual increase in prices and gradual reduction of subsidies on oil over the next 3 to 5 years. So yes, the VAT will not affect the price, but the price of oil and fuel will increase. And since you talked about running and beating Adil in running, so I think I'll do more running in the future, because once oil prices go to the international prices, we'll have to park our cars and go work by walking, probably, or running to work.
Well, alternatively, we could just all take the Nile. But thank you very much for your input tonight. That's Yasser Hakim live in the Egyptian capital of Cairo. Of course, if you missed that race, you can catch it on YouTube. It's a fascinating piece of work altogether. Quick run through the markets here for you. Something moving fairly quickly as well, not just the Nile. The Egyptian markets up 200 basis points in trading today. Fairly dismal numbers coming through across the board. Elsewhere, the JSE relatively flat, down 0.04 percentage points, and the NSE in Nairobi up by about a third. South Africa is losing nearly $2 billion a month as power cuts continue to bite and Medupi still delayed. And this man still has his sights on buying Arsenal. We'll have his story shortly. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
Global Business, weekdays at this time on CCTV Africa.
Sustainable development and a commitment to developing partnerships with Africa. Some of the key phrases already used at the Africa Global Business Forum here in Dubai.
There is a need for a predictable environment in which investors have to put their money.
Welcome back to the program. You're still watching Global Business Africa. Let's focus on energy matters. South Africa's power shortages continue to strangle economic growth, and they're actually costing it nearly $2 billion every month. Despite that staggering cost, one of 2 massive coal-fired power stations vital to ending the power shortage is still years behind schedule and consistently plagued by strikes. In the first bit of a 2-part focus series, Angelo Coppola explores the labour issues that stopped Medupi from coming online 4 years ago.
While the country struggles along, one of the power stations touted as a partial solution, Medupi, is now 4 years behind schedule and is currently in week 6 of a strike. Unresolved issues include travel allowances, accommodation arrangements, retrenchment decisions, and timing and payment of bonuses.
Look, many of the issues that are there have got history, particular history. These issues emanate from the 2013 strike. You'll see why workers are so resistant, because these were the issues that remain on the 2013 strike, from the old PLA to what we call a partnership agreement.
The union says that the site contractors have a lot to answer for.
Now, the big problem is the arrogance of especially contractors at this stage, because the contractors have decided since the last meeting we held to withdraw from engagement. I don't know, maybe they're hoping that those issues will go away or they will vanish into thin air, which I don't think that will happen. Some of them, we know, they're now discussing the issue of mass dismissal.
The state-owned entity also has been inconsistent in its response to the strike, the union says.
Eskom is not neutral in this process. They are the owner of the site. They are the one who makes decision. They are the one who are looking at time frames, when the site is going to start, when the site must be closed and finished. And I think they've got an interest on the issues. They cannot sit on the fence.
The strike at Medupi has been going on for around 6 weeks now, and there are major unresolved issues there that cut to the heart of the problem in the country, around electricity and around labour and how they deal with business and vice versa. We also have to question the role of the Public Enterprises Minister and the fact that she hasn't got involved in trying to fix this thing. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Johannesburg.
Right, on to deal-making of a different sort now. Aliko Dangote still has plans to buy Arsenal for the right price in future. The continent's richest man, according to Forbes, told Bloomberg he will not buy the London Football Club at, quote, a ridiculous price, but at one that the owners will not want to resist. He says he's currently focusing on growing his $16 billion portfolio, and once he's satisfied with the trajectory of the overall business, an offer for the English club will certainly follow. Dangote is an Arsenal fan. He reckons the club needs new direction and that the manager, Arsene Wenger, quote, needs to change his style a bit, end of quote. American businessman Stan Kroenke currently owns roughly 2/3 of the club, while Red and White Holdings, which is backed by the Russian magnate Alisher Usmanov, owns roughly 30%. Quick run through commodity prices. As we mentioned a little earlier, crude oil prices continuing that strong rally. 68.06, the latest figure that we have on the board for you, up about 2 percentage points in trading. Also today's second consecutive high of 2015 so far. Fairly interesting numbers. We'll keep tabs on this story and this rally in future. An entrepreneur in Zimbabwe is turning to the sun to power rural communities. His story is coming up next.
We want to tell the African story differently. You know, Africa is known from the conflict, hunger, starvation, whatnot, the bad things. Yes, there's that going on, but we also want to project Africa in another light. We want to bring out the positives. If it's in a conflict, if it's in an election, we're able to give a level playing ground. Well, I'm a field reporter or correspondent, if you like. From a young age, I always wanted to know what's happening in the news. I wanted to read newspapers. I was actually reading for my folks the newspapers. I've covered general elections. I've covered conflicts in the entire African continent. I was thrown into the deep end when I got an assignment to go into Somalia. That was quite the experience. I think that was my first conflict zone to cover here at CCTV. Going to Somalia opened up to me the world of war correspondency, and since then I've been able to go to several other places like the Central African Republic. I've been there 3 times. The conflict there is different from what we've had in the past, and we've had experiences where we've been attacked. You have to realize whether you're cut out for this and you want to go ahead with all this. So I can say it's a career that is not for the faint-hearted so far. As soon as I'm given a story to do, that passion, it ignites something in me, and I get excited when I see my package or my production on air, and then I know that I'm actually doing maybe what I was called to do at some point. The only way you can actually highlight some of these issues is through doing what we do. So certainly it's worth the risk, but then again, I keep saying no story is worth my life. I'm Jane Keo, I'm a reporter for CCTV Africa.
Africa is not one country.
And Africa is not one story.
But as Africans, we do share one belief.
What's more offensive in a
that whatever the challenge, we will overcome.
CCTV Africa brings you unrivaled coverage.
From the fight against Ebola to the fight for greater freedom.
From the figures seeking your vote to the figures shaping your economy.
This is Guy Henderson reporting from the jungles of East.
And all the reasons to celebrate the diversity of life on this great continent.
Welcome back. Zimbabwe, like several other sub-Saharan countries, you heard about Nigeria early in the bulletin, South Africa as well, they're all struggling to cope with a power supply deficit. Zimbabwe has an installed generation capacity of about 1,200 megawatts, but it actually needs well over 2,000 in order to cope with current and future demand. The supply gap, however, will become even bigger because the country's authorities are pushing ahead with plans to connect more clients in rural areas to the national grid. For one entrepreneur in Zimbabwe, however, closing this supply gap starts by tapping into that nuclear reactor somewhere in the sky.
Simba Muriro thinks Zimbabwe's future is bright, very bright, and that it will be powered by the country's most widely available and cheapest resource.
For me, it is the energy source of the future. It's cleaner, it's more flexible, it's more predictable. The sun is going to do what it's been doing for millions of years. And yes, it's expensive now, but the prices are generally coming down.
That last bit is encouraging more investment in the sector where progress has been sluggish. Several independent solar power producers have been licensed. Our sun is on course to be the first to launch.
And this location, what makes it so ideal?
This 30-hectare piece of land will be its first plant. And that's just the beginning.
As a company, what we've aimed for is 230 megawatts over 5 to 10 years in tranches of 5, right? The reason is we want to grow slowly in bite-sized chunks that we can actually deliver. We don't want to be one of those people that just talk, but you don't see anything on the ground. We want to be, if we say we're going to do something, we pretty much show you that we're actually doing something. Secondly, there's only a limited amount of solar that can be taken into the Zimbabwean grid. So we see that our target will basically be 10 years of development, and then obviously a period whereby you get your payback. And obviously, once the development is over, you can really see the impact in the communities that you've gone into.
It's a massive mandate for this bright-eyed 30-year-old entrepreneur who just 3 years ago abandoned a career as a hotelier in Dubai, packed his bags, and took a gamble not only on himself but his country. It's now paying off.
But the funding in this environment is always a challenge. The issue to attract funding at a rate that makes economic sense, especially locally, is just not there. I mean, some of the banks haven't done project finance forever, especially for power projects. They basically helped us access offshore funding that we bring into the plant. So basically all our funding is coming from Germany, precisely. And it's come in the form of equipment as well. So it's not money that's moving around. They basically took a huge leap of faith to say, listen, we believe in the market, we've talked to the authorities, it is basically the solution that Zimbabwe needs right now, let's just go for it.
The equipment has already been shipped.
Well, there isn't much space here. I'm literally having to squeeze through small gaps in amongst all these stacks and stacks of solar panels that have been brought in our warehouse here, ready for deployment. There are over 80,000 of them, enough to produce 5 megawatts of electricity. That's enough to power 5,000 rural homes per day.
Not a single one was damaged in the 16 days it took to offload the 100 trucks that ferried the panels. A painstaking process done by this crew of out-of-work carpenters, builders and gardeners who will now be trained as the company's installation team. Their jobs, a further benefit for the project that will change lives in rural areas by lighting up homes, enabling farmers to do winter cropping, and school children to access the internet. Farai Mwakutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And that's exactly the kind of story that makes you think of a marriage made in heaven. Solar panels and Tesla's Powerwalls put together, makes you go off grid. It's brilliant. Right, quick run through the currencies here for you. The Kenyan shilling is having an absolutely torrid time. Its depreciation against the American dollar has accelerated from March. Back then it was around 90 or so to the dollar. Now we're talking about 95 to the greenback. Some absolutely dismal numbers. Remember, however, the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, will be meeting on the 6th of May to decide what direction rates should be heading in. Here's what we're working on for tomorrow's program. We will be looking at Nigeria and South Africa. These two African titans have a simmering row over compensation claims for victims of xenophobic violence in South Africa. And we'll also be looking at the growing popularity of chicken feet in South Africa. Apparently, it's now the best-selling meat in the country. So, on that note, mixing cuisine and business sense, we'll leave it there for now. But as always, we welcome your feedback on the program. Global Business Africa at cctv.com is the email address to use. And of course, when we're not on air, Facebook and Twitter are your ports of call. Have a great day. Thank you for watching. See you in 23 hours. I'm Ramanyai.